Okay, now let's go through the questions which you have asked in the chat box. So the first question is, as we have discussed the hypercholesterolemia station over here, can you ask about the stroke and the MI symptoms in history, as these are complications? So you know it is a counseling based station. So you'll have to cut short your history part. Definitely, you have to ask the patient, do you have any symptoms? The patient told you that I don't have any symptoms. I'm just here for the routine checkup. So if you'll just go into the detail of all the possible complications which the patient may have from having a high cholesterol level, for example, the stroke or the MI symptoms or the angina symptoms, that will be, I think that will be so much extra, because you don't need to spend more than 2 to 3 minutes in the data gathering, and the patient has directly told you that I don't have any symptom. I'm just here for the routine checkup. So it would be better that don't ask those questions. But yeah, definitely at the end of the management, you have to tell the patient, as you know these are the possible complications, so you'll have to tell the patient that if you develop this symptom, then this is something to be worried about. At the moment you are asymptomatic, but as we know from the consultation that the patient had high cholesterol and the QD score was high, which was 14. So you should be telling the patient, doing the safety netting, that if you develop any chest pain, if you develop any weakness of the body, that is something you should not ignore. Call the 999 and come to the emergency right away. So it's not important to ask those questions in the data getting part, but it is really important to to do the safety netting to show the examiner that you are a safe doctor. So I hope I have cleared your query. There is another question, how can I improve my IPS? Any advice? Okay, the best way to improve your IPS is practice. After knowing the station, practice it with as many people as possible. Don't do practice with only one study partner, because you might learn some good IPS lines from one person, and you might learn some other good IPS lines from someone else. And in general, the IPS can be improved. There are few things like show empathy to the patient. Listen to the concerns of the patient. If the patient has told you any particular concern, don't ignore it in the management part. Reflect back to that concern, that you asked me a while ago that you are concerned about this. Okay, let me come back to it. And now let's discuss about that concern. One more thing is that in the data gathering part, you are asking the questions to the patient. The patient is telling you the answer. So it is a two-way conversation. But sometimes due to the shortage of the time, we get driven away in the management part, and what we do is we try to complete the station by completing the medical management. We think that we'll have to complete all the medical management, and sometimes we skip that we are not addressing the concerns of the patient, or sometimes in a hurry we keep on telling all the medical information to the patient without involving the patient, because it is also important to keep it a two-way conversation. Keep on involving your patient, keep on asking him that have you understood everything so far, do you have any questions so far. Give some breaks. If for example, if you have told some piece of information to the patient, he might have got some question in his mind. Ask him, have you got any questions so far? If the patient says yes, let him ask the question, explain it in detail. Okay, so in general, the IPS is the two-way conversation. Show empathy and sympathy to the patient, listen to the concerns, address those concerns, and in the management, keep on involving the patient with you. And how you can improve your IPS, that is definitely the practice. Okay. In telephonic consultation, can you prescribe medication? For example, you are doing a telephonic consultation and you think that the patient needs needs the medication, then it is better that you ask the patient to come to the hospital setting or the GP clinic for the in-person consultation. Just consider the telephonic consultation as a triage call. You have taken the history from the patient, and you know that it's a self-limiting condition and the patient does not need any medication. You can ask the patient, you can counsel the patient, you can stay at home, do this and this, it will get better at its own. But if you think that the symptoms or the condition of the patient needs some medication, you can simply call the patient that, what about if you can come to the hospital or the GP clinic, we will assess you and then we will give you the medication. That will be a better approach.
So, Dr. Adnan, to this,
uh,
I would like to add something. In this,
so
some scenarios, if there is a patient, for example, that might or might not be able to come in person, keeping the COVID situations in mind, you can, after talking to the senior, you can prescribe via electronic prescription, and the patient can collect from the any nearest pharmacy. But do keep in mind if you should or you should not prescribe. If you are doubtful in any way, avoid doing that, and it's better to call the patient for a consultation.
okay, thank you for adding the piece of information. So the next question is, should we tell the patient about the Q-risk score? Uh, yes, you have to tell the patient about the Q-risk score. After telling the diagnosis to the patient, you can tell the patient that we have calculated your Q-risk score, which is a score which indicates that what is the possibility of having a cardiovascular event in the future. So your score is unfortunately high. So that's why we might need to start you on medication, and we would like to advise you to do some lifestyle modifications. Yes, it is important to tell the Q-risk score. We were just telling you the general overview of a counseling based station. So we were not specifically telling you this station, we have just used it as an example. But yes, if you will just go into the detail of this particular station, as they have specifically given you the QS score, so you have to explain it to the patient. So the next question was, how can we explain that about the QRS to the patient? So I have already told, and that you have to tell the patient, and that based on your risk factors, we have calculated a score which indicates that what are the chances of having a cardiovascular event in the future. So we call it as a QRS score. Your score is 14, which is high, and that's why we need to start the medication and you need to do some lifestyle modifications. So any other question? Mhm. Okay, as there are no further questions, let's just conclude the session. Let me just revise a few things. Save your time in the data gathering part. Even if it's a counseling based station, you cannot skip the data gathering altogether. Okay, because uh, the mark distribution is there are 4 marks for the data gathering. Okay, so if you will just jump to the management part, you are going to lose those 4 marks. So you have to take the data gathering, but don't spend too much time on that, only 2 to 3 minutes, because the core of the station is to know the risk factors and then address those accordingly. So you have to save around 5 to 6 minutes for the counseling, I mean the diagnosis and the management part. And secondly, IPS are really important in any situation, but particularly in the counseling based station. For example, if the patient is telling you that he has got this problem, you have to reflect back to it. For example, the patient says that uh, patient tells you that I'm not eating healthy. I generally eat burgers and chips. So you have to come back to it in the management part. And in the management part, you have to tell about the medication. And, mm, okay, so you have to tell about the medication, but in a counseling based station, lifestyle advices are equally important as the medication and the psychosocial aspects as well. And the next question is, can you please brief the psychosocial aspect, doctor? Psychosocial aspect means, for example, uh, let's not use this scenario which we have discussed over here as an example. Let me generally tell you that the patient says, doctor, I have this back pain. And when you ask the patient, what's your job? The patient tells you, uh, I work in a bank. I have to sit on a chair and it's really, really bothering me with my job. So that is a psychosocial impact, that how the medical condition of the patient is affecting his daily routine or his job. Okay, so that is considered in the psychosocial aspect. Similarly, as the Dr. Arose previously told you, that for example, a patient came with a transient ischemic attack. So as a safe doctor, you should ask the patient in the data gathering, when you are getting the symptoms of a transient ischemic attack, you have to add one more question, that do you drive, or uh, have you uh, came to the hospital at your own by driving yourself. So you have to tell the patient that you need to be careful and stop driving at the moment, because this is also a psychosocial impact, that if a patient has transient ischemic attack, the patient might have an attack while driving. Okay, that is safety netting as well as the psychosocial impact. Okay, any other question? Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and the time you have taken to join the session. Thank you very much, Dr. Aruz. Uh, and if you would like to add anything at the end, it's over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Adnan. I think you've covered up pretty much everything. If anyone has any questions after the session, you can still drop your questions in the on the WhatsApp groups, and we will definitely answer those. And we will be sharing this recorded session in a while with all of you. And thank you all for joining the session.